In the winter of 1923, a doctor stepped into a decaying estate hidden deep in the valleys of West Virginia. The telegram had been short, almost desperate. "Come quickly. The child has been born. But something is terribly wrong." What he witnessed inside that crumbling mansion would haunt him for the rest of his life. The newborn wasn't simply unusual. It was impossible. His features defied every medical principle known at the time, as if nature itself had been bent and twisted by some invisible hand. But here's the part no one outside that valley was ever meant to know. This birth wasn't an accident. It was the result of over 2 centuries of deliberate planning, orchestrated marriages, and secrets buried so deeply that even local townsmen whispered only in the dark. So the question is, what did the Ashworth family create? And why did the world try so hard to erase them from history? If stories like this pull you in, make sure you hit subscribe and tap that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. I always find it fascinating to see how far these stories travel. And if you're already part of this community, thank you for keeping these hidden histories alive. Now, settle in, because this isn't just another story. It's a descent into a family's darkest obsession. The valley lay hidden beneath layers of mist, its entrance obscured by towering ridges that bent inward like guardians sworn to protect secrets buried in stone. Few dared to wander there, and fewer still returned unchanged. In 1698, Cornelius Ashworth arrived in the colonies with a vision that set him apart from ordinary settlers. While others sought land, freedom, or fortune, his ambitions were rooted in something darker, something destined to stain generations. He purchased thousands of acres deep in what would later become West Virginia, a land almost unreachable, where thick forests swallowed paths and rivers curled like serpents. The valley became his kingdom. Untouched, unseen, unchallenged. Unlike other men who scattered across the frontier, Cornelius established an oath, a decree that none of his descendants would break. Their blood must remain pure. Marriage outside the family line was forbidden, a sin against his vision. At first, cousins wed cousins under the excuse of survival. The land was isolated, and opportunities for alliances were scarce. Yet within Cornelius's stern voice and steel-gray gaze, the rule became doctrine, not necessity, an iron chain binding sons. The Ashworth estate soon grew into a fortress, a sprawling mansion of stone and timber with walls high enough to blot out the horizon. Guards, always men of unyielding loyalty, stood at every entrance, ensuring no outsider crossed. Townsmen in nearby settlements whispered of strange echoes carried by wind from the valley. Some claimed to hear chanting, others the cries of infants that seemed older than their years, their voices heavy with unnatural weight. Inside the estate, portraits of stern-faced patriarchs lined the corridors. Each painting bore nearly identical features: sharp noses, pale skin, eyes too light to belong in shadow. The resemblance was no accident, but rather design preserved through generations. Cornelius's sons followed his command without question, for his presence lingered long after his death. His words, etched into journals and carved upon the estate's hearth, reminded them that their destiny was to remain apart, untouched, untainted. By the mid-1700s, marriages grew closer. Uncles wed nephews' sons, cousins intertwined until lineage itself blurred. The family tree twisted inward like a serpent, devouring its own tail, branches looping upon themselves with each union tightening the noose. The valley became not just home, but prison. Young men who longed to leave found themselves bound by loyalty, by fear, by whispers of curses that awaited any who dared abandon their bloodline. No one escaped. The surrounding land grew wary. Farmers tilled their soil far from Ashworth Hollow. Hunters avoided its forests even in famine. Children were told never to follow the river upstream, for those who did might vanish into shadows. Still, within the estate, the family thrived. Wealth poured in from land deeds and mineral rights hidden beneath their soil. They became untouchable, powerful not through politics or armies, but through secrecy, silence, and fear that bound communities. By 1789, one patriarch recorded chilling words in the family journal. "We are chosen. Our blood is not common. To mix with others would be to dilute what God has set apart for greatness." His conviction poisoned sons. From then on, births were not celebrated as blessings, but catalogued as results. Every child became an entry in leather-bound records, detailing eye color, bone structure, mental faculties, and strength, as though livestock in a controlled experiment. Some boys displayed unusual traits: eyes that reflected torchlight like polished stone, limbs that bent too far without breaking, memories sharp enough to recall pages read once. Such anomalies were praised, celebrated as proof of divine selection. Others bore signs less favorable: twisted spines, brittle bones, or minds that wandered into endless silence. These sons were hidden away, their existence erased from records, their names never spoken again, as though they had never drawn breath. The valley echoed with strange rhythms. At night, torchlight flickered through high windows, while shadows moved in unsettling patterns. Men from nearby towns described glimpses of figures whose bodies seemed stretched, elongated, barely human, as though shifting in form. Rumors spread that the Ashworths no longer sought neighbors' company. They needed no outsiders, no alliances. Their land fed them, their wealth sustained them, and their lineage provided the only companionship their decrees allowed. Their world shrank inward. Yet with each passing decade, secrecy became harder to maintain. Deliveries of medical equipment arrived under cover of night, hauled by mule-drawn carts up winding paths, guarded by men whose silence was purchased with coin and threats alike. Doctors summoned to the estate returned shaken, refusing to speak of what they had seen. A few tried, their voices trembling as they hinted at children whose eyes were misplaced, whose bones bent like reeds in water. Most of those doctors vanished from records shortly afterward. Their colleagues spoke in hushed tones of ruined reputations, revoked licenses, or untimely deaths that served as warnings. The Ashworth family's grip extended further than most dared imagine. Meanwhile, within the estate, boys grew into men who were simultaneously cousins, brothers, and uncles to one another. Relationships blurred until the words themselves lost meaning. Bloodline had become a labyrinth, a knot no man could unravel. By the early 1800s, the family had crafted rituals to reinforce obedience. Sons stood before portraits of ancestors and swore oaths never to stray, never to dilute what was preserved. Loyalty was demanded, deviation unthinkable, escape impossible. Outside, locals noticed fewer sightings of Ashworth men. Markets no longer saw their presence. Churches lacked their attendance. It was as though the entire family had folded inward, cutting itself from the world like a sealed wound. Yet stories spread. Hunters claimed to find tracks larger than human feet near the valley, impressions deep as though made by creatures carrying unnatural weight. When asked, locals lowered their voices and insisted they had seen nothing. The estate itself began to change. Windows were shuttered, gardens overgrown, walls fortified. It resembled less a home and more a fortress designed to conceal. The air surrounding it carried a heaviness, as though nature itself recoiled. Still, inside, generations continued. Sons were paired with cousins chosen not by affection, but by calculation. Which traits should be preserved? Which features encouraged? These choices became strategy, as deliberate as any general planning for battle. Journals reveal how fathers observed newborns like scientists. Skin translucent, veins visible, eyes black as coal, sensitive to light, limbs extended. Each entry a cold assessment, emotions stripped away, leaving only the pursuit of a vision none questioned. Those who faltered, those born without remarkable features, were considered failures. Hidden rooms beneath the mansion concealed them from sight. Outsiders never saw them, and whispers suggested they were confined for life, shadows erased by family decree. Generations passed. The Ashworths aged within their valley, but their wealth insulated them from collapse. They bribed officials, silenced townsmen, and expanded influence into courts, ensuring no law, no investigation could penetrate their fortress of secrecy. The valley itself seemed cursed. Storms lingered longer there, lightning striking more often than elsewhere. Travelers who wandered too close reported hearing voices carried on the wind, voices that seemed too young yet too knowing to belong to men. By the late 1800s, their features grew more pronounced, eyes elongated like those of predators. Joints appeared where none should exist, movements unnatural, bending in ways that unsettled even their own kin. Yet these were celebrated, proof of progress. The valley had become a laboratory cloaked in nature's veil. Sons were both subjects and keepers of an experiment centuries in the making. Their lives were no longer their own, but part of a lineage designed with chilling intent. Every decision, every union, every child born was tethered to Cornelius's vision, echoing across centuries. His decree had not faded, but grown, shaping men into reflections of an ideal no outsider could ever comprehend. The valley endured unchanged, and so, by the dawn of the 20th century, the Ashworth Hollow was a place of silence, secrecy, and shadows, a place where men no longer lived as individuals, but as fragments of one unbroken, unyielding bloodline. The Valley of Secrets stood untouched by time, guarded by walls and whispers, a monument to obsession. And within its mist, sons of the Ashworth family prepared unknowingly for the moment when their greatest horror would be born. The journal surfaced in 1924, smuggled by a weary estate worker whose conscience could no longer bear the silence. Bound in cracked leather, its pages carried handwriting from generations of Ashworth men, stretching back over 2 centuries. At first glance, its opening entries seemed harmless. Birth records, marriage dates, property notes, mundane details any family might preserve. But as pages turned, the tone shifted, cold and clinical, describing children not as sons, but as specimens. By the 1750s, entries documented eye color combinations, bone structures, peculiarities of gait and speech. Each observation was meticulous, devoid of affection. Fathers wrote of sons with the detachment of scholars, cataloging oddities rather than raising kin. One early patriarch noted, when paired, the boy with pale eyes and the cousin with narrow jaw produced offspring bearing irises unseen in common men, reflecting light unnaturally. The words revealed not pride, but satisfaction, a calculated result. Another entry recorded a boy with limbs extending longer than his peers. Rather than alarm, the writer marveled, arms surpassing ordinary length, potential for strength. Every line carried the weight of men reshaping their bloodline as though crafting metal. By 1789, Ezekiel Ashworth, grandson of the founder, committed words that chilled even hardened readers. I shall wed my own offspring to preserve gifts bestowed by Providence. His conviction was absolute, his quill etching sin as strategy. The journal described offspring born with skin nearly translucent, veins glowing faintly beneath torchlight. Others came with joints doubled, bending limbs in ways that defied anatomy. Still, Ezekiel marked them not defective, but advanced, the next stage of man. Children deemed ordinary, those with plain eyes, unremarkable physiques, or dull intellects, were hidden, their existence struck from records. Pages turned blank where their names should have been, erasures more damning than any word could ever inscribe. By the early 1800s, the journal revealed deliberate pairings. Men recorded which cousin had yielded offspring with heightened perception, which nephew carried unusual resistance to illness. Families elsewhere arranged unions for love, but here marriages became experiments. The coldness of language struck hardest. Sons were listed with traits like pupils vertical, skin pallid but luminous, memory exceptional. No affection filled margins, only results, as if these children belonged to a laboratory, not a home. One entry detailed a boy who could memorize entire sermons after hearing them once. The writer, rather than celebrating intellect, calculated how to preserve such capacity through union, ensuring the gift would never vanish from lineage. Another chilling passage noted a child who shrieked in frequencies unbearable to listeners. Rather than recoiling, the father recorded, "Potential weapon if harnessed." The boy's suffering was ignored, his pain catalogued only as possibility, a tool for future. By the mid-1800s, the journal's ink grew frantic. Handwriting slanted, margins crowded. Observations described eyes placed at unnatural angles, allowing boys to see behind without turning. Men treated this grotesque reality not as curse, but as blessing. In places, diagrams illustrated skeletal anomalies, elongated torsos, additional ribs, measurements noted with precision, angles calculated. These sketches carried eerie precision, as though drawn for publication in scientific volumes, but they remained hidden in the journal's spine. Entries described temperaments as well. Some boys displayed violent rages triggered by light or sound. Rather than conceal or comfort, fathers documented triggers meticulously, marking them for future reference like data points in an unholy experiment. Hidden within the journal were notes about underground chambers. They were not mentioned openly, but referenced obliquely. Specimens unsuitable relocated below. These words implied entire lives confined, erased from sunlight, existing only as experiments in shadow. An estate worker later confessed the truth. Beneath the mansion stretched rooms where boys considered failures lived, monitored, their conditions logged. Their suffering was described with detachment in the journal, as though their torment were mere progress. The most disturbing revelations came during the late 1800s. Entries described breeding plans with charts, lines crossing names, pairings chosen not by family bonds, but by results. Sons were treated as livestock, arranged by what they might produce. These records exposed a truth. The Ashworths were not simply victims of isolation, but active architects of their lineage's mutation. They believed themselves chosen, destined to transcend humanity by sculpting their descendants into something beyond men. One writer, believed to be Nathaniel Ashworth, declared, "Ordinary men labor in fields, but we labor upon flesh itself. Our legacy will be eternal, written in the bones of generations." His words revealed a mind consumed. As the years advanced, descriptions grew increasingly impossible. Children with eyes entirely black, yet aware. Others with spines so elongated they required custom chairs. Fathers documented each detail with precision, as though recording marvels instead of horrors. Occasional fear seeped through the ink. One entry read, "The boy's gaze unsettles even his sire. He watches as though knowing thoughts unspoken." The words were crossed out hastily, as though the writer regretted betraying doubt. By the dawn of the 20th century, the journal contained more diagrams than words. Strange skeletal sketches, organs labeled, anomalies catalogued. One sketch showed a rib cage so vast it resembled the framework of a warped cathedral. Doctors who glimpsed these notes later confirmed their authenticity. In hushed accounts, they admitted the precision exceeded that of most trained physicians of the era, suggesting the Ashworths themselves had developed frightening expertise in anatomy. The journal also recorded temperaments of brilliance. One boy calculated harvest yields in seconds, another predicted storms with eerie accuracy. Such gifts were noted alongside deformities, as though intellect and mutation were intertwined threads of the same fabric. Yet always, behind the meticulous notes, lingered reverence. Fathers described abnormalities as gifts, never curses. Pain, deformity, madness, none were failures, only missteps on a path toward perfection envisioned since Cornelius's decree bound blood to itself. A few entries hinted at outside contact. Doctors summoned to consult were often dismissed after brief visits. Some names appeared in margins, later struck through, suggesting their silence had been purchased or enforced before secrets could slip beyond the valley. In 1890, an entry declared triumph. The boy with elongated fingers demonstrates strength beyond expectation. His grip bruises grown men. He shall father the next generation. The child was not loved. He was weaponized, valued only for potential. Another record, dated 1893, described ocular displacement, eyes angled differently, granting vision in directions impossible for ordinary men. The writer called it divine advancement, a phrase repeating throughout, evidence that they saw mutation not as curse but destiny. But the journal became scripture. Within its leather binding, sons found instruction, guidance, justification. Each generation added pages, each man inscribing proof that they were chosen, that their grotesque lineage carried meaning no outsider could comprehend. When the estate worker smuggled it out, risking his life, he carried more than paper. He carried centuries of obsession, proof of a family twisting humanity itself into shapes unrecognizable, all in service of an unholy vision. The worker confessed he feared death for taking it. Guards watched everything. Yet he claimed voices in the valley haunted him, cries from beneath the estate that compelled him to reveal what lay hidden. Historians who later examined the journal described a sickness seeping from its pages, a chill crawling over readers as though the words themselves carried residue of suffering. Each sentence seemed to whisper, "This was deliberate. This was chosen." The smuggled book became a forbidden artifact, evidence of horrors that polite society refused to acknowledge. Yet it proved beyond doubt. The Ashworths had not stumbled into deformity, they had engineered it, guided by conviction spanning centuries. To hold that journal was to peer into minds consumed by obsession, men who reduced kin to data, who believed their bloodline was a canvas upon which to paint evolution, no matter the cost in human suffering. Every entry dripped with certainty. They did not doubt their mission, did not question their morality. In their eyes, they were pioneers, building a future beyond humanity. One birth, one experiment, one sacrifice at a time. And so, the journal that should never have existed revealed truth darker than legend. The Ashworth Hollow was not merely a place of secrets, but a laboratory of blood, a monument to man's most dangerous obsession. The first physician summoned to Ashworth Hollow in the 19th century was Dr. Marcus Webb, a man seasoned by years of frontier medicine. Yet nothing in his experience prepared him for what awaited inside those walls. When he arrived, he was greeted not with gratitude but with silence. Guards escorted him through long halls where portraits of pale, stern men watched from the shadows, eyes following with unsettling intensity. The patient he examined was no ordinary boy. His eyes were elongated vertically, resembling the pupils of reptiles. When torchlight struck them, they reflected with a predatory gleam, sending shivers down the doctor's spine. Dr. Webb noted in his journal that the boy's breathing carried a hollow whistle, the sound of air passing through a rib cage stretched too wide, as though hollow trees had replaced ordinary bones within his chest. Another boy displayed an unnatural gift. His gaze followed movement across the room at impossible angles, eyes placed slightly askew. Webb realized he could see in directions no normal man could ever hope to achieve. The doctor recorded his findings with precision, though fear trembled in his handwriting. He described elongated limbs, extra joints bending like hinges, and fingers capable of curling backward, clutching objects with grips bruising grown men. Among the most disturbing cases was a boy whose skin seemed translucent, faint blue veins glowing beneath lamplight. Webb could see the rhythm of his heartbeat through the flesh, pulsing with eerie luminescence that unsettled every observer. Yet alongside grotesque deformities came brilliance. One child performed mathematical calculations faster than any scholar Webb had known. Within seconds, he solved complex problems, his eyes darting, his voice calm, his mind far beyond his years. Still, these gifts carried unbearable costs. The boy could not tolerate sound above whispers. When Webb dropped a pen, the child screamed with rage, clutching his head, his body convulsing as though assaulted by invisible daggers. Another youth demonstrated uncanny awareness. Blindfolded, he navigated rooms flawlessly, avoiding obstacles with precision. Webb concluded his sensory perception surpassed ordinary sight, yet the boy's humanity seemed absent, his stare unblinking, fixed upon unseen distances. The physician attempted to warn local colleagues, but his words were dismissed. They believed he suffered nervous collapse. His reports contradicted every known principle, describing anomalies too extreme for science, so his reputation quickly deteriorated. Whispers suggested his exile was not accidental. The Ashworth family's influence extended into courts and councils, ensuring no physician could expose their secrets. Webb lived the rest of his life haunted, journals hidden among his belongings. When discovered after his death, those journals revealed detailed sketches, spines curved like serpents, torsos lengthened beyond proportion, skulls with eyes misaligned. His notes read like fragments torn from nightmares rather than scientific observation. One chilling page described a boy gripping Webb's wrist during examination. The strength left bruises lasting weeks. Webb confessed in trembling ink that no grown man had ever overpowered him with such ease before. He also noted episodes of rage. Some children erupted when touched, lashing with violence sudden and unrestrained. Guards restrained them with difficulty, yet family members remained calm, as though expecting such outbursts, documenting them with clinical detachment. Another physician, summoned briefly, recorded his horror at a child who cried in frequencies piercing enough to cause physical pain. Men clutched ears, blood trickling, while the infant wailed with resonance echoing through every chamber. The Ashworth men, however, celebrated this as progress. They described it as resonant voice, marking it as an advancement. They ignored agony it inflicted, instead planning how such a trait might be preserved for future generations. Doctors who resisted were silenced. One disappeared after attempting to report his findings. Rumors suggested his carriage overturned mysteriously on a quiet road. Others signed documents of secrecy, bribed with sums large enough to ensure silence. The few who dared whisper among themselves spoke of ocular displacement, neurological anomalies, skeletal distortions. Yet none dared publish for fear their careers, even lives, would be ended by the Ashworth network of power. What unsettled Webb most was consistency. These traits did not appear randomly but patterned, cultivated across generations. He concluded deliberate breeding had guided them, turning anomalies into expectations, creating a lineage diverging from humanity's natural course. He wrote that the Ashworth Hollow was no household but a laboratory, generations of sons reshaped intentionally. He feared the experiment was succeeding, each birth carrying traits beyond comprehension, evidence of calculated manipulation spanning centuries. One boy astonished Webb with prodigious memory. He recited entire books after one reading, voice steady, flawless. Yet when asked simple questions of daily life, he faltered, unable to connect with ordinary human conversation or emotion. Webb lamented this paradox. Brilliance paired with isolation, gifts tethered to suffering. He feared such intelligence, detached from empathy, might become dangerous. A mind capable of cold calculations without restraint of compassion or moral tether. Another case described strength beyond human measure. A teenager lifted furniture alone, muscles rippling beneath distorted bones. Webb admitted awe, yet dread, for his face bore expressionless calm, as though strength existed without awareness of consequence. The journals revealed patterns of deliberate pairings. Certain cousins selected to enhance vision traits, others matched to heighten memory. Webb realized these unions were orchestrated with precision, each son evaluated not as kin, but as experiment. Doctors concluded they had stumbled into a controlled breeding program spanning centuries. This was no accident of isolation, but deliberate pursuit. A family convinced they were destined to transcend, shaping their bloodline into something unrecognizable. Webb confessed terror that such mutations might spread. He feared sons leaving the valley could carry traits into the wider world. His words closed with haunting certainty. "If they escape, we shall not recognize them." Later testimonies from attendants confirmed Webb's fears. Some boys exhibited uncanny foresight, predicting storms or speaking truths later confirmed. Though uneducated, they seemed to know knowledge unearned, awareness unexplainable, as though perception stretched beyond mortal senses. One attendant described a boy who knew his thoughts before spoken. He wrote of unbearable unease, feeling stripped of privacy, exposed to gaze that pierced deeper than flesh. Such encounters drove attendants into silence or madness. Doctors observing these phenomena grew convinced the Ashworth pursuit extended beyond physical form. They believed the family sought enhanced perception, intellect, even abilities approaching supernatural, convinced they were not corrupting humanity, but elevating it. Yet consequences grew darker with each generation. Children unable to endure light, boys whose skin blistered beneath sun, others whose nerves rejected sound or touch, existing only in silence and darkness. Still, these were preserved. The Ashworth men viewed suffering not as tragedy but as necessary price. Their records revealed chilling detachment, documenting agony with the same precision they described triumphs, as though pain itself was proof of advancement. By the early 20th century, rumors of their patients spread quietly among medical circles. Whispered tales of elongated spines, translucent flesh, black eyes that tracked like predators. Yet no one spoke publicly, fearing ruin or death. Webb's final notes revealed despair. He admitted he no longer believed in natural law. What he witnessed convinced him humanity could be reshaped by will, that blood could be sculpted into forms never intended by creation. He confessed his nights were haunted by visions of eyes staring from darkness, reflections of futures where such mutations walked freely among men. His words trembled with certainty that the Ashworths had succeeded too well. Other physicians who glimpsed the hollow left similar impressions. Though silenced, fragments of their testimonies survived in letters, private notes, and whispered warnings. Each confirmed the same chilling truth. The Ashworths were crafting an unnatural lineage deliberately, relentlessly. Their silence was enforced by power reaching beyond the valley, but their fear endured. They died with secrets unspoken, journals hidden, whispers buried. Yet fragments survived, revealing horrors so grotesque that even hardened men trembled. The doctors who saw too much carried memories they could never erase. And though their words were silenced, their testimonies confirmed a legacy forged not by accident, but by obsession, a bloodline deliberately reshaped against nature. The telegram reached Dr. Samuel Hartwell in December of 1923, its words short and cryptic. "Come quickly. The child has been born. Something is wrong." He could not ignore the urgency pulsing through every syllable. Traveling through snowbound mountains, Hartwell imagined fevers, twisted limbs, fragile lungs. Yet nothing in his long career as a physician prepared him for what awaited at the Ashworth estate, hidden within that haunted valley. The mansion loomed, dark against a pale winter sky. Guards ushered him inside swiftly, their silence unnerving. Torches flickered in long corridors, casting shadows across stern portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed alive, watching his every step. In a chamber heavy with smoke and cold air, the child lay swaddled. Hartwell expected frailty. Instead, what he saw forced his breath to halt. The infant's skin glowed faintly, veins visible as though painted upon glass. Limbs were elongated, grotesquely disproportionate, fingers stretching far too long, each tipped with an extra joint bending unnaturally. Yet they grasped with alarming strength, clutching Hartwell's wrist so tightly that bruises would linger for weeks afterward. Most unsettling were the eyes, completely black, void of pupil or iris, yet intelligent, tracking movements across the room with precision. Hartwell recoiled. He felt observed, studied, judged by a newborn that should not comprehend. The child lifted his head within hours of birth, defying every law of nature. His gaze followed complex shapes traced in air, recognition sparking behind those abyssal eyes. This was not ordinary instinct. This was awareness. When he cried, the sound tore through the chamber like a blade, vibrating at frequencies that stabbed eardrums. Men winced, some fled. Hartwell's skull rang with pain as though assaulted by invisible hands. Yet the infant showed vitality undeniable. Pulse steady, lungs strong, body resilient. Hartwell expected deformity to weaken, but here strength thrived within grotesque form. The paradox unsettled him. Broken design, yet impossible endurance, as though perfected through corruption. The men surrounding the crib did not show fear. They whispered reverently, gazes fixed, as though beholding prophecy. Their eyes shone with pride, conviction that centuries of sacrifice had reached culmination in this single birth. One spoke of destiny fulfilled, another of perfection realized. They did not see a monster. They saw triumph, the living proof that their lineage had transcended humanity, becoming something elevated, something set apart from mortal men. Hartwell trembled. He recognized survival impossible under such mutation, yet every test contradicted him. Blood pressure normal, lungs efficient, heart strong. The child's body, though alien, functioned seamlessly, as though designed by a hand beyond comprehension. The doctor's notes, written later in secret, described luminescence coursing beneath translucent skin, fingers like coiled instruments, and a presence so unnerving he struggled to remain near. He confessed terror not at weakness, but at strength. The infant, named Cornelius III, was hailed by his kin as culmination of 2 centuries' devotion. They gathered around him with solemn reverence, speaking softly of legacy, of design perfected through generations of careful calculation. Hartwell's medical instincts clashed with dread. Every fiber screamed this creature should not survive, yet there it lay, thriving, gripping, watching. He questioned whether he was witnessing not life, but emergence of something altogether beyond man. One moment seared into memory. Cornelius's grip bruised Hartwell's wrist as though steel coiled within flesh. The doctor stared at black eyes unblinking, realizing strength of an adult already coursed through arms of a newborn. The men praised this, claiming divine selection, celebrating traits as marks of advancement. Hartwell wanted to protest, to call it horror. Yet their stares silenced him, faces alight with fanatic devotion to their bloodline's destiny. He sensed danger greater than any disease. This was obsession manifested, centuries of design culminating in something unnatural. The family did not mourn deformity, they worshipped evolution. They believed the boy proof they were chosen. Hartwell attempted rational explanation, but none listened. His training meant nothing against generations of conviction. These men were not seeking cures. They were seeking confirmation that their legacy had achieved perfection through deliberate corruption of blood. That night, Cornelius III's cries shook stone walls. Guards staggered outside, clutching ears. Yet within chamber, men smiled proudly, as though hearing hymn of triumph. Hartwell fled into corridor, haunted by resonance that lingered long after. In private, he confessed fear that the child was not simply abnormal, but preternatural. His eyes followed patterns unseen, his cries inflicted pain, his grip displayed unnatural force. These were not anomalies, they were advancements cultivated. Hartwell burned many of his notes, unwilling to risk ridicule. Yet he could not burn memory. He carried vision of black eyes glowing in torchlight, staring with intelligence that had no place within infant flesh. Days stretched in the estate as Hartwell observed. Cornelius required no extraordinary care. He fed with strength, slept soundly, developed rapidly. Every expectation of frailty failed. Instead, vigor radiated from him, mocking every natural law. Hartwell realized he was not doctor there, but witness. The family required no counsel. They sought only confirmation of their triumph. Their whispers filled chambers with reverence, each man declaring child proof of providence fulfilled. The estate grew restless with pride. Guards walked taller, attendants whispered louder. Cornelius's presence transformed atmosphere. Shadows felt heavier, air thicker. Hartwell perceived shift. This was not birth of a boy, but ascension of obsession into flesh. He attempted departure, yet men insisted he remain, recording development. Their gazes left no room for refusal. He realized he was captive, chosen not for skill, but for silence. Another witness bound into their secret. Nights he spent awake, haunted by cries resonating in skull, bruises darkening wrists, black eyes glimmering in memory. He felt himself unravel, sanity corroded by awareness that nature's rules had been rewritten before his eyes. Cornelius grew stronger within days. His head lifted steadily, limbs extended with force. He clutched objects, manipulating them with dexterity months beyond his age. Hartwell watched evolution accelerated, child advancing with speed that defied comprehension. The men gathered, recording notes of progress. Their excitement overflowed. They debated next unions, calculating how to replicate traits, preserve strength, secure future generations. To them, Cornelius was blueprint, a design to be multiplied. Hartwell attempted to warn of danger. He argued such strength paired with instability could destroy them. Yet his words fell like dust. They looked upon him with disdain, their faith unshakable, their vision immovable. He resolved to escape. Yet each corridor bristled with guards, each path barred. He feared that should he resist, he would join countless others silenced by coin or blade, erased as though never breathing. The child, meanwhile, thrived. His eyes grew sharper, tracking men with uncanny precision. His cries grew louder, forcing even hardened guards to cover ears. Yet within chamber, men bowed heads reverently, as though before altar. Hartwell's despair deepened. He recognized the child was not aberration, but product. This was not end, but beginning. Proof the Ashworth experiment had succeeded beyond fear. He feared future generations would follow, more monstrous, more powerful. Before departing, Hartwell pressed final words into his secret journal. This child is proof that man can shape flesh against nature. I pray he does not survive, for if he does, our world may fall. He left Ashworth Hollow broken, carrying bruises on wrists, tremors in voice, shadows in mind. Though he burned most notes, memories endured. For he had seen the impossible. A child not human, but something beyond. The family remained within their fortress, celebrating Cornelius III. To them, he was proof of destiny fulfilled, culmination of sacrifice. To Hartwell, he was nightmare made flesh, a harbinger of future mankind was not meant to see. The valley remained silent to outsiders, yet within, pride swelled. Cornelius thrived under adoration, under belief that he embodied perfection. The world outside slept unaware, blind to secret birth that would echo through history. And so, Cornelius III lived, watched, celebrated, and feared. His existence marked the peak of obsession and the threshold of catastrophe. For within that infant's black eyes lay not innocence, but prophecy, written in flesh. Beneath the mansion of Ashworth Hollow stretched a labyrinth of stone corridors, chambers carved into bedrock. Few outsiders ever knew of them, yet they held the darkest truth of the family's centuries-long obsession with blood. These underground halls were soundproofed with meticulous care. Thick doors, sealed with iron bolts, kept voices from rising above. Ventilation systems ensured air flowed without betraying scent of life, hidden below the estate's foundations. Here lived the sons deemed failures, those whose forms strayed too far from family's desired vision. To the world above, they did not exist. Within shadows, they endured lives of secrecy and confinement. Attendants sworn to silence moved among them, providing food, water, and medicines. They too were bound by oath, for any betrayal meant death. Every act within those chambers was documented, every anomaly catalogued with cold detachment. One hidden boy grew limbs so elongated he could barely move without assistance. Mechanical supports strapped his arms, yet still they dangled grotesquely. His frame towered but remained frail, a structure both enormous and fragile. Another remained child-sized despite reaching adulthood. His face bore maturity, his eyes filled with intelligence, yet his body never passed the stature of a boy. He was trapped between childhood and manhood, suspended unnaturally. Some endured conditions more horrifying still. A youth whose nervous system overreacted to sound lived in absolute silence. Attendants fed him through tubes, for chewing caused agony that made him convulse, every nerve rebelling against existence. Others survived only in darkness. Their eyes, sensitive beyond measure, blistered at the faintest flame. They lived in pitch blackness, communicating through whispers, their pale skin glowing faintly, their presence more specter than flesh and blood. One chamber housed a boy whose torso grew twisted like coiled rope. Vertebrae multiplied unnaturally, stretching spine until he required furniture built to hold his elongated frame. He lay in stillness, eyes sharp though body broken. Another displayed uncanny perception. He spoke of conversations occurring miles away, describing them with eerie accuracy. Attendants confessed fear that their thoughts themselves were visible to him, stripped bare by awareness no ordinary man possessed. The family did not abandon these children. They valued them as specimens, studying every trait, documenting each anomaly. To the Ashworth men, suffering was not failure but information, data for shaping future generations with precision. Attendants recorded in ledgers, skin transparent, veins luminous, jaw misaligned, voice resonant beyond normal range. Cognitive ability heightened though speech impaired. Each note carried weight, guiding choices for unions that would birth next generation. Instruments ahead of their time appeared in chambers. Medical devices not yet common in hospitals were present, suggesting outside researchers with hidden motives supported these experiments, feeding resources into a valley already shrouded in silence. One boy could not endure touch. Even gentle hand caused his skin to blister. He lived isolated, never embraced, never comforted. His attendants clothed him in special fabrics, careful not to spark agony upon contact. Another possessed strength disproportionate to his form, thin and frail in appearance, yet capable of bending iron bars with his elongated fingers. His power unsettled attendants, who dared not approach without caution, fearing sudden, unpredictable rage. Some hidden children displayed intellectual brilliance. They memorized entire volumes of knowledge with little effort, spoke in tongues of mathematics or astronomy, understanding principles without instruction. Yet they remained imprisoned, their genius chained within shadows. One chamber echoed with rhythmic tapping. Inside sat a boy who mapped time by knocking against walls, predicting weather changes hours before clouds appeared. Attendants marveled yet feared him, for his predictions never failed. Another chamber contained a youth whose cries shook stone foundations. His voice carried resonance beyond hearing, vibrating through bone. Guards reported headaches, dizziness, and nausea after prolonged exposure. Yet the family praised his unique advancement. The hidden children became both shame and pride. They could not be shown to outsiders, yet they were not discarded. Instead, they were studied as precious keys, puzzle pieces to the future the family envisioned. Men who maintained records believed they were observing humanity's evolution. They described these anomalies as steps forward, evidence the family's sacrifices yielded progress. Pain meant nothing when weighed against destiny, promised by Cornelius centuries earlier. Attendants confessed fear but obeyed. They whispered of eyes glowing in darkness, of voices predicting events before they occurred, of rooms so silent that they felt watched by presences that seemed aware of unseen realms. One chilling account told of a boy who spoke names of men arriving at a state days before they came. He greeted them with uncanny familiarity, though he had never left underground chambers in his life. Another spoke equations beyond comprehension, scribbling symbols on walls. Years later, scholars recognized fragments of advanced mathematics not yet discovered at the time. How he learned them remained unexplained, his mind seemingly touching truths unborn. The chambers themselves were engineered for secrecy. Thick walls absorbed sound. Ventilation funneled odors away. Lights were dimmed, some rooms left in perpetual darkness. Every detail ensured no hint of existence escaped into world above. Decades passed, generations cycled, yet the hidden children endured. Some lived entire lives underground, never feeling sun, never walking upon grass. Their world was shadow and stone, their companions' attendants sworn to silence forever. Legends whispered that some developed beyond flesh. Attendants described encounters where thoughts were answered before spoken, where boys predicted deaths days in advance, or where shadows seemed to move in rhythm with their breath. The family's journals reference these sons obliquely, using phrases like "preserve specimens below" or "study continues." They were not forgotten, but integrated into calculations, guiding pairings, influencing choices shaping the next cycle of controlled unions. The hidden children were not regarded as curses, but as resources. Their suffering fueled ambition, their anomalies seen as stepping stones. Each deformity, each brilliance, became another data point on the path to transcendence. The attendants themselves often left broken. Some vanished after years of service. Minds fractured by proximity to boys who seemed half human, half something else. Their testimonies, later whispered in taverns, became fragments of forbidden legend. One claimed a boy read dreams, describing visions attendants saw in sleep. Another swore shadows themselves bent unnaturally around certain chambers, as though drawn by presence of something neither fully of this world nor apart from it. And still the family persisted. They saw in each hidden son not tragedy, but promise. They imagined futures where such traits would emerge perfected, cleansed of pain, harnessed for greatness beyond comprehension. Their obsession knew no mercy. The hidden children remained confined, their lives consumed by a legacy they never chose. They were unwilling sacrifices, yet worshipped by kin who saw in them fragments of destiny fulfilled. The chambers grew crowded over years, housing dozens whose bodies betrayed natural law. Each new arrival meant further confirmation. The Ashworths were convinced they had crossed threshold into realms of possibility unseen by ordinary men. Yet beneath pride, fear lurked. Guards reported strange occurrences, doors opening unassisted, whispers in empty corridors, shadows lengthening without light. Some feared the hidden children were evolving into something no wall, no guard, could contain forever. Attendants wrote in secrecy of dread. They described children whose eyes reflected knowledge older than family itself, whose voices spoke truths they should not know. They feared these sons were becoming not men, but something greater. Still, the family rejoiced. They called these phenomena advancements, blessings. They ignored terror of those who witnessed, convinced suffering and strangeness alike were milestones toward destiny. For them, the hidden children were not shame, but evidence of progress. And so beneath Ashworth Hollow, the hidden children endured, living monuments to a family's obsession. Their existence remained secret, but their legacy pressed forward, whispering of futures where the line between man and something else would vanish forever. The winter of 1924 descended heavy upon the valley, snow cloaking ridges, silence pressing into every hollow. Within the Ashworth estate, whispers grew restless, as though men sensed culmination of centuries was nearing unavoidable reckoning. For 12 months, Cornelius III had thrived, defying every prediction of frailty. His body grew rapidly, his abilities sharpened. Guards spoke of strength that rivaled men, cries that shook stone, and eyes reflecting intelligence far too old. The family gathered often, surrounding the boy with reverence. They spoke of destiny fulfilled, of a bloodline perfected through generations of sacrifice. Yet behind celebration, unease festered, for even they struggled to contain his presence. Cornelius began demonstrating behaviors that unsettled even loyal kin. He predicted storms before clouds formed, described conversations held in distant rooms, and watched men with gaze that pierced deeper than flesh, leaving them trembling under his silent scrutiny. Some nights, attendants swore walls vibrated with resonance of his voice. They heard tones too low for ears, yet felt them reverberate in their bones, a haunting reminder that his cries were no longer mere infant wails. Strange incidents multiplied. Doors opened without touch, flames flickered wildly when he cried, shadows lengthened unnaturally. Guards whispered among themselves, questioning whether they still witnessed evolution or something drifting beyond comprehension, beyond control, beyond human restraint. Still, the patriarchs declared him triumph. They believed he embodied culmination of Cornelius's decree, proof that their lineage transcended mortality. They ignored fear etched on faces of attendants, dismissing it as weakness unworthy of chosen blood. But as February approached, tension thickened. Attendants noticed Cornelius wandering halls at night, though doors were barred. They found him staring at portraits, unblinking, as though communing silently with ancestors painted centuries earlier. None dared disturb him. On the night of February 14th, screams erupted, echoing through the valley, carried across snow-covered ridges. Locals miles away later swore they heard them, voices of men breaking in terror unlike anything human. When authorities arrived, they found a state torn apart from within. Walls collapsed inward, beams splintered as though struck by force impossible to measure. No explosive device was discovered, yet destruction suggested power exceeding earthly explanation. Men of the family lay scattered, bodies twisted, expressions frozen in horror. Their wounds baffled investigators, bearing trauma no weapon could cause, as though flesh itself had been ruptured by unseen force radiating from inside. Cornelius was nowhere to be found. Neither were dozens of hidden sons who had endured beneath the mansion. Chambers once filled with specimens lay sealed. Doors fused as though welded from inside, their occupants vanished completely. Investigators scoured ruins for weeks, uncovering nothing but fragments. Records vanished, journals destroyed, corridors collapsed. Final reports described devastation inexplicable. Yet official story claimed a gas explosion, burying truth beneath convenient fabrication to pacify public. The government seized property under eminent domain, declaring it a preserve. Locals were relocated, maps redrawn, valley erased from common memory. What remained of Ashworth Hollow was swallowed by forest, its ruins guarded by silence. Yet whispers endured. Survivors spoke of hearing cries after a state's fall, faint echoes drifting through mountains. Some claimed to glimpse figures moving among trees at night, elongated shadows that vanished when confronted, leaving only unease behind. Doctors who once served the family refused comment, but private letters revealed dread. They suspected Cornelius survived, perhaps alongside hidden sons, scattered into wilderness, carrying bloodline into world beyond confinement of valley walls. Over decades, rumors spread of men born elsewhere displaying anomalies reminiscent of Ashworth descriptions: black eyes without pupils, elongated fingers, uncanny intellects. Physicians recorded them quietly, never publicly, fearing ridicule, but patterns whispered of lineage continuing. Some researchers speculated hidden sons escaped during a state's collapse, integrating into surrounding towns under false identities. Their descendants, though diluted, carried remnants of traits, spreading quietly into veins of unsuspecting populations across America. Government files declassified decades later confirmed authorities never accepted gas explosion as truth. Reports described trauma inconsistent with fire, witnesses speaking of sounds like thunder from within walls, vibrations that shook earth like quakes. One investigator wrote of corridors sealed as though stone itself melted. He confessed disbelief, claiming evidence pointed to forces unknown to science. His words were struck from final version, buried in classified archives for decades. Still, scattered testimonies survived. A maintenance worker spoke of hidden sons with eyes glowing faintly in dark. He vanished soon after, leaving behind letter warning that family's legacy had not ended but escaped confinement. In following years, sightings surfaced of strangers unsettling in appearance. Miners in distant states told of workers with strength disproportionate to frames. Farmers described neighbors with knowledge of weather weeks in advance. None connected dots publicly. By mid-century, urban legends spread among medical students. Whispers of a lineage engineered to surpass humanity, a family erased from records, yet survivors walking unnoticed among common men, their presence disguised by dilution of bloodline. The most chilling accounts came from rural towns where locals claimed to see black-eyed children standing silently at night, watching, unblinking. Authorities dismissed them as folklore, yet stories mirrored descriptions buried in Ashworth journals. Historians piecing fragments together argued Ashworth's experiment had succeeded too well. By pushing beyond natural limits, they birthed something that could not be confined. Their collapse was not end, but dispersal, scattering anomalies into wider world. Every surviving document emphasized deliberate intent. The Ashworths had not stumbled blindly into deformity. They cultivated it, guided it, celebrated it. Cornelius III was not anomaly, but apex, product of a vision centuries in execution. What destroyed the estate remains mystery. Some claimed Cornelius himself unleashed force uncontrollable, rupturing stone, silencing family. Others believed hidden sons acted in revolt, power boiling over after lifetimes confined within darkness beneath a state. No evidence confirmed either. Yet absence of bodies, sealed chambers, and missing children suggest conclusion far darker. The bloodline did not perish. It slipped unseen into shadows, beyond grasp of those who sought closure. For decades afterward, residents near former valley reported unease. Animals avoided area, travelers felt watched, compasses spun erratically. Forests swallowed ruins, yet silence hung heavier there, as though land itself remembered what occurred. Modern researchers examining remnants of journals described obsession bordering religion. Men wrote with conviction that they shaped destiny, crafting future beyond humanity. Their downfall was inevitable, but their vision may have escaped, carried in veins. Geneticists reviewing unexplained anomalies in medical history whispered of Ashworth legacy. Patterns appeared too consistent, traits too specific, to dismiss as coincidence. Yet no institution dared investigate openly, fearing ridicule or consequences should truth emerge. The question haunting scholars remains simple yet terrifying. Did Cornelius survive? If so, what became of him? Was he destroyed in collapse, or did he walk into world, carrying gifts his kin worshipped? Some believe he lives still, his growth slowed by anomalies, his body enduring beyond ordinary span. Others believe his descendants hide in plain sight, scattered, waiting for traits to converge again into form, unstoppable. Whatever truth, one certainty remains. Ashworth Hollow's last night was not conclusion, but transformation. A family's centuries-long experiment ended in fire and ruin, but its results may still linger silently among men today. The valley remains closed, designated preserve, untouched by settlers, avoided by hunters. Locals pass stories quietly, warning children never to venture near, for they believe shadows there still whisper with voices of vanished sons. To this day, no evidence proves final fate of Cornelius or his kin. Yet every whispered sighting, every unexplained anomaly, every chilling echo reminds us that the legacy of Ashworth Hollow may never truly die. The ruins stand hidden, smothered by forest, erased from maps yet alive in memory. A testament to obsession, to arrogance, to a family who believed they could rewrite creation itself and escape consequences written in blood. And so the story closes not with certainty, but with dread. For somewhere beyond mountains, in quiet towns or crowded cities, descendants may still walk unnoticed, carrying within them the darkest vision ever born of man.